And of course, growing up during the civil rights era and seeing what my brothers and sisters were going through, because when I came to America, I immediately identified with our condition. Pause, please. So here in America, after observing, I identified with my brothers and sisters here. It wasn't easy because I was sort of kept at a distance because at the time I was speaking in a very clipped British accent, and then I would lapse into my what they call the West Indian patois, and I was called a coconut. So
by whom?
By my own brothers and sisters here.
I've heard that many times. How did that affect you?
Well, it confused me because having awareness, my father being a Gaviite, he joined the Gavi movement in San Pedro de Macorís in Dominican Republic. So he had educated me into, our pride as African people. And so I thought that all you need was dark skin to be a member of this great culture. And I was amazed that I was kept, at an arm's length, and because of my speech patterns. And so I studied I had read that Sidney Poitier from the Bahamas had a very strong island accent, and that what he did in order to overcome that, he looked at the newscasters, because everybody looks at the news and everybody understands the news. So therefore I looked at newscasters to learn Americanese, the American dialect, accent. And then I was told I was talking white. So either way I couldn't fit in, it seems, So, but in the police department, I'm glad that I had that experience, because in the 20 years that I spent in the New York City Police Department, I came to understand why we are in the situation that we're in. And this answer is the same, it's very simple. Lack of knowledge of who we are. Lack of a sense of our purpose to discover who we are. And we complain that they don't teach us in the schools about ourselves. It's not their responsibility. The Jews, they go to these universities too, but in the basement of all their homes, they're studying classical Hebrew. They're studying their story, and that's why they have a sense of a pride of who they are. And we don't have that, because we are depending on other people to teach us about ourselves. And I always said, no one is going to give you back your crown or your throne. You've got to take it. And to take it, you don't have to march in, you don't have to sit in, you don't have to wade in, you don't have to protest. All you have to do is take your attention away from those who are trying to take your eye, take your vision into their construct, and create your own look from the basis of your own history. And so while I was pounding the beat in East New York, someone brought me a tape of Dr. Ben. I said, oh my gosh, this man sounds like my father. Because when I would go to my father's tailor shop, because he was a great tailor also, and he would have me make buttonholes and overcast the seam of pants and so on, he would tell me, he would say, we are a great people, but he says we don't know who we are.
How important is that, to know who you are? And why do you say that is the foundation of our liberation? And though we can march and demonstrate, if we don't know who we are, explain. How is that the critical point of our importance?
Because basically, we carry the genes of the parents of humanity. And the parents is not supposed to be taking direction from his youngest child. You are inverting the process. We have abdicated our role as the elders of the earth to follow the dictates of planetary freshmen. When I say that, now, the place that we need to go and discover the primary source of our greatness is along the Nile, which is the home of all humanity. That's where all humanity began. The far regions of Kush, Ethiopia, Monomotapa, South Africa, and in Kenya. This is where the oldest fossils of humanity is found. So we have to respect our age on this planet as a people of African ascent. Now, since all people started there, what I'm about to say applies to all humanity. What we find in the temples, in the pyramids along the Nile, was left there by humanity's elder parents for them to be guided by. These are principles. It was a spiritual culture, not a religious culture. I must emphasize it was not religiosity. It was spirituality.
Give us the difference
Based-
between religion and spirituality.
Spirituality is a recognition of the connectedness of all things, that everything is interdependent on this planet. Religion teaches, shows that we are divided into various camps, warring, each one swearing to have the whole truth. I have seen versions of the Bible that has been changed from age to age. You have so many versions, and they change the wording, even though the book itself said that it's not supposed to be interfered with one jot or tittle. Human beings, for instance, you take in the book of Genesis, when they speak of the curse of Canaan, it says, in the older King James Version, it says, "A servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren." Now, in the New Standard Version, it says, "The lowest of slaves shall he be unto his brethren." Because the interpolators of this book know that African people here in the West have had this slave experience, the person who reads that will equate that so-called curse against Canaan with African people. As a matter of fact, the British were the ones who promulgated the so-called curse of Ham in order to justify the enslavement of African people during the Atlantic slave trade. So once we comprehend this, it's our sacred duty to go to the source where our ancestors left it deep in stone, because they knew there would come a time when we would lose our way. And so they made sure that they inscribed their wisdom deep in stone and on papyrus, so that we can find our way back. But unfortunately, our way has been blocked because we have embraced belief. Belief in a version of religiosity that is totally patriarchal, which has created in African people a schizoid personality. We come from a matrilineal and matrifocal culture. Yet we worship a deity that is all male, who runs a heaven with all male angels and little boy cherubs. I ask, whenever I lecture anywhere in the world, I ask the audience, I says, you, Jewish person, you, Christian person, you, Muslim person, give me the name of one female religion, one female angel in your religion. All I get every time I ask that question is total silence. Now, when I go to the Nile Valley, I see that the deific principles are always expressed as masculine and feminine side by side. So, to us, deity, what is commonly referred to as God in the English language, is not just male. It's a mother, father of all creation. I cannot say a mother, father, creator, because the Tor still makes it male. Creatrix will make it female. We have to say a mother and father of all creation. So in that area alone, we have lost a very important part of our knowledge system, not belief. Religion depends upon belief, and therefore this belief must be augmented by faith. Whereas in the spiritual culture of our ancient ancestors, it was based upon knowledge, and knowledge depends upon facts. So that's a great difference there. And because our system was based upon respect and love of nature, our very writing was called the Nku. Some say Meruneter, Meruneture. We don't argue about the various dialects we are using as we come into resurrection of ourselves. But you would see that we use animals, insects, birds, reptiles, trees. The very tools we used were part of our writing system. This means that we were a people in touch with nature because in the Nile Valley, the culture was an agricultural system. We were farmers and gardeners in the Nile. Our prowess in farming and gardening and creating those locks in the canals to irrigate the soil after the inundation of the river made it the breadbasket of the then known world. So our classical African culture is one based upon farming and gardening. Now, but what has happened to us? We have embraced a culture of religion that is that of the nomadic sheep herders of Asia Minor, which puts us in contradiction with our true culture. I said, in the 20 years I was a policeman, I came to realize our problem is that we do not know who we are.
We don't know who we are. And my African buddies have another term on it.
What?
They say African Americans don't know what time it is.
Yeah, listen, Brother Chester Higgins just walked into the studio, and these two brothers have just really kind of connected together, and Brother Chester did a book on African temples, the pyramids, the pharaohs of Nubia. I mean, it is an awesome work. So I think it's kind of divine that you should walk in the door, because I was doing this interview as a prelude to interviewing, can I say Professor Higgins?
That's right, Dr. Higgins.
Dr. Higgins, absolutely.
No, he's definitely got many honorary degrees. Every book that he's written deserves that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just honored that you should walk in the door.
How fortuitous that you would be here.
Isn't that
Yeah.
something?
Yeah.
Really, really, really.
But you know, I will do it another time, but I want to say, you know, this brother's been out here. I met him the year that the Asante Hinte came to the Museum of Natural History. They had this parade. He was, you know, City College and the Museum of Natural History, Opakawari. And I was photographing in the street, and I saw Samaj and one or two other people with him. And I thought it was quite courageous how he was dressed, number one, because it was full of symbols. And so then I went to inquire, well, who are you and what does all this means? And then I was taken that he was very clear about himself and how he situated himself in a legacy. Because, you know, I have been traveling a lot. My first trip to Egypt was 40 years ago, 1973. And I've been traveling to Egypt back and forth, and I didn't see many black people over in Egypt. And all the black Americans, understandably, were into West African culture.
Right.
I mean, because, you know, the African studies or West Africa was more accessible. But very few people were claiming the legacy of the ancient Egyptians, of the Nile River culture. And so I thought my heart was very warmed to find him and find out that it was not just him, as you run into some people, and it's very, you know, skin deep, so to speak. But there was him and other people as well, and he was actively trying to get other people interested in the legacy, and that his interpretations of the legacy was, as two people who've been doing this research independently of each other, his interpretation I found quite, similar, but also refreshing in terms of the way that he would put things. And he had an influence on how I finished this book on the African diaspora, because I was going to do it anyway, but he was saying that, most African Americans, when we think of our history, we think of our history coming from West Africa, which is true. That's the immediate history. But the ancient history is that we all started out in the Blue Nile River Trench, which was Ethiopia, Sudan, Egypt, and that we should not give up that Egyptian heritage, which unfortunately most Black Americans don't seem to be aware of. And as we were relating, I said, think about museum collection. What is the most expensive and extensive museum collections in the world? They're not paintings from Rembrandt, even though Rembrandt knows people are there. The most expensive and the most extensive stuff is ancient Egyptian sculpture, artifacts, whatever. So people know how important, other people know how important our history is. We have yet to understand, to arrive at that understanding. But, it's there.
Well, Chester, you say our history. Can you put a narrative to our history, African Americans? How are you relating African Americans to ancient Egyptian history? I'm talking about Africans here in America. How are you?
Well,
give me a narrative for how we get to be, how that gets to be our legacy. And are you saying we are directly blood linked to the ancient Africans for running?
We are, first of all, when you say Africans and Americans, I have to refer to it the way my Ethiopian friends refer to it. We are Western-born Africans. Because see, we seem to break that link, and it has a lot to do with semantics. We are Western-born Africans. The West Africans are descendant from East Africans because, look, the beginning of Africa, beginning of all people, and the earliest fossilized skeleton is Dinkwanash, who they call Lucy, 3.5 million years ago. From Lucy in the highlands of Ethiopia in Afar, she is the beginning of the tree. And the tree descended from her. So people then, as communities begin to grow of the people, they begin to move away. Some, I'm sure, moved away because they wanted to. Some, I'm sure, moved away because they got tired of being with other people who they were around. But whatever, they started to migrate. And people migrated down the hills, because Ethiopia is highlands, where you have a country for 6,000 to 14,000 foot mountains. They migrated downhill, and they start following, like all humans do, they start following the rivers, walking along the rivers. The rivers in ancient time were the ancient highways. So people will follow the rivers in the dense forest, and they will migrate down to, first the migration went from Ethiopia down to South Africa, it seems, and then starting across the continent, and then at the same time into North Africa. So all of the Egyptians are nothing but cousins of the Ethiopians. And let's say that they are second or third cousins. We are probably, the 10th or 12th cousins, but we're all part of that same African family. And in spite of the fact that Europe, the technological power of the Europeans won the wars to defeat the Africans, that does not mean that a lot of Africans put up great fights against it. But since those wars are fought and our ancestors lost, we're here. But the fundamentals of society was developed not by Scandinavians, but by African people who formed the nation of Kemet. And people say, we're going back to the Bible about Moses. Well, if the Pharaoh decided he was going to kill every young kid, and if that kid didn't look like him, that kid was in trouble. So Moses, to survive, must have looked like him. The rest of us. But yes, we are in that line.
Okay.
Now, whether or not we want to, I think because people have lost wars, and Egypt was the last defense, the major defense before the onslaught of the Europeans, and the Persians, and the Hittites, and the Syrians, they were the strongest and the richest force to deal with. And once they were defeated, nobody likes to say that, you know, we're from a line of people who got defeated. But just because you were defeated, and yes, we have been defeated, but for our people to even to survive the iniquity of the dark days of slavery means that we were heroes, and we have the ability to come back. Look at Barack Obama. Here we have essentially out of we've been, you know, obviously we've been enslaved a lot more when we've been free. But let's take someone like Barack Obama. When education, he's what, 40, 50?
50 some odd. Mm-hmm.
In the last 50 years, starting from zero, he can become a president. This is why, you know, people knew that it was dangerous for black people to become intelligent, because we have the same abilities as everybody else. And I've always admired in this country the tenacity and industrialness of West Indians. And next to them, you see is their brethren from the continent who are coming here. These brothers from Senegal, and I lived in Senegal, they come here and they live 6 or 10 to a room. They live co-op style, and they're on the corners hawking all these wares, and they're building big homes back home, and they're taking care of their children, and they're taking care of their wife. And it just shows you that they believe, every immigrant I talk to is so happy to be in America, because they know that America, if they work hard, they can get ahead. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to be, you know, all roses and you won't run into horrible people, but, you know, horrible people are everywhere. You go to Nigeria. You know, people are horrible because they are people, not because they are white, black, Jewish, or green. So you have that mix. It comes with it. It's the Seth part of life.
That's right.
Are there any, but in terms of customs, beliefs, traits, do you see that in the Africans born in the West?
Yes and no.
That will connect them directly with their ancient
Well, that's what I
Egyptian
looked at in my book on the Feel the Spirit, and I went looking for these connections. Most places, these connections have been overlaid and disconnected, but in some places they're very strong. The strongest place I saw where the retention of African culture is in Suriname, or in Maroon communities, and in Suriname is the Maroon community. The second retention place you'll find is in places like Brazil and Haiti, albeit they exist in different sort of ways. But then you have found retention in Carriacou and Grenada. The African religions is probably the most obvious retention vessel. Say, you know, the Candomblé, Santeria, Macumba, Vadum, Winti praise. And that's where you'll find probably people who embrace that Africanness the most will be members of those groups.
How do you connect them with ancient Egypt?
Well, it's not a direct connection. I'll tell you why. I think Western-born Africans have been confused by the interpretation of the white intellectual about religion in Africa. Because, see, if you go to Africa, West Africa, you see a lot of different, so-called different religions, because they may have different expressions and different deities. So if you look at it from that way, it just looks like a confusing hodgepodge that really sort of drives home the very negative connotation of paganism. However, if you look at, if you study Egyptian religion first, which is what I did, you then see, when you look at these West African religions, you realize that the Egyptian religion is the quilt. And that what these other non-literate cultures who may have made pilgrimage to Egypt, what they came back out of, illiterate cultures, is they came back out of it with pieces of it. And they're pieces because their languages may have changed, they may have been separated from what the original priest saw as the message. But if you know Egyptian religion, you then can see parts of what's in there that is Egyptian, that is long forgotten, but is there. Now, the most important thing about Egyptian religion is ancestor worship. Is that, you know, forget the fact about, you know, the sun and the forces of nature, but Egyptians cared about their ancestors. They believed that their ancestors were pretty much like national treasures, and that a part of your establishing your worth is also your feeling about your ancestors. All African religions is based upon ancestor worship. Voodoo, all of it means ancestors. So, in various degrees, you may have different sort of elements that have maintained themselves. But I think that given how we've been so made afraid of our own culture, that it's been hard for people to reach back. And also, you have another problem. You know, bread in the Bible is a stop sign. And first of all, I have to say the Bible is something that was developed by a priest, an Egyptian priest, Moses, to rebrand the Hyksos. But the Bible, it plagiarized the Egyptians and didn't turn around and demonize them. So African Americans are very wary of getting close to anything Egypt because they don't want to mess up their insurance policy. You know, because you develop a death insurance policy on getting to heaven based upon your belief in Jesus and Moses and what have you. And if you start embracing anything, being open to any knowledge that veers from that, there is the fear that you may jeopardize your chance to get to heaven. So I think a lot of people find that for that reason, understandably, for that reason they find it very hard to go down that road past the stop sign.
Brother Samaj, I saw you just go get a book. Can you?
Yeah, I want to share this book by Olamide Lucas. What's the title of that book? Just
Religions in West Africa and Ancient Egypt. Is he? Oh yes, about to say his name is Nigerian. I see he's a deacon in Lagos. Yes.
Right. His father was a Yoruba chief, but he shows here historically, linguistically, the connection of ancient Egypt to the Yoruba. Even today, we link Oshun to HERU and the other deities, you know, to the various deities in Kemet. So as we move from the Nile Valley, we still retain the basic form. And Chester and I go back and forth because I hold that the Egyptians did not have a religion. And I don't want to be tied up in semantics, but the word religion comes from the Latin word relegare, which means to tie back or to tie again. Since Africans never saw themselves as disconnected from divine, there's no reason to be tied back. You see, it was, as I insist, it was a spiritual culture based upon the interdependence of all things on this planet and all things in the cosmos. You see, so and that's very essential. Now, of course, I understand that Chester uses the term religion because people understand that it's about praise of the divine. It's about trying to live as righteous a life as possible, and not doing harm unto anybody, or not doing harm to yourself or to your fellow human beings or to the planet. So we understand that. But all of those concepts had already existed in the Nile Valley through the spiritual culture of Ma'at. Okay? Ma'at meaning harmony, justice, truth, order, reciprocity, sobriety, and propriety, and other English adjectives that describe this great culture. A culture based upon the harmony of all things in the universe that keeps the sun and the planets in their appointed orbit. That order was replicated on the earth plane by our ancient ancestors. Why else would we design our temples to capture the light of a distant star once a year? What were we doing seeking to invite the biocosmic energy of the constellation of Sa, known as Orion, directly into the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid of Khufu, or the star Seperet, which exists within the constellation of Canis Major, known to us as the constellation of Anpu? directly into the queen's chamber. That kind of precision, that kind of geometric precision is what our ancestors were involved in. It's such a shame that we are afraid of mathematics, we're afraid of geometry and algebra when we were the founders of these divine sciences. So this is why we are called upon to embrace Ma'at, because basically all that you find in the so-called Mosaic Decalogue existed long before in African culture. And I would say this, Chester, that we are attracted to the Bible because of the Africanisms in the Bible. The book of Proverbs, most of those proverbs existed thousands of years before in the maxims of Ptah-hotep, of the early dynastic period of our ancestors. And I would say that this whole idea of dynasties was created by this priest Manetho to classify the timeline. But modern day Egyptologists, and I call them exactly that, Egyptologists, not all of them are, but the majority of them have been gypping African people of their culture, denying the Africanity of this culture. Yes, we know that our ancestors traveled also when the Sahara was fertile. It seemed as if as it began to dry up, we moved to the Nile Valley, met other brothers and sisters coming from the south, as Chester said, following the course of the river. And together we laid, my father used to say that we built a Bible of stone pages because we knew there would come a time when we would forget our way and we would need an exact road back. When you visit the pyramid of Unas, it said of the king Unas, "This is my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased." And that's in the pyramid text, which is the oldest corpus of spiritual writing in the world. Later, that same term, "This is my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased," was plagiarized by the compilers of the Bible and put in the mouth of God when Jesus was being baptized by John the Baptist, that this voice came from heaven and said, "This is my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased, hear ye him." Well, those words were uttered thousands of years before, so how do they appear in the King James Version? Plagiarism, pure and simple. All Egyptologists agree that the 104th Psalm, as an example, is an almost a direct copy plagiarized from the song to the Aten Ra, written by Nefertiti's husband, Aten Re Akun, who's now called Akhenaten. So when our brothers and sisters, and I know it's going to be very painful for us to pull ourselves away from belief to embrace the knowledge system of our ancestors. Why? Very simple reason. We don't want Grandma to have been wrong. But she could have been sincerely wrong. But again, we took what they gave us and we turned it into a force and held it up as a mirror to show their indecency in their mistreatment of their elder brothers and sisters who they dragged from Africa. When Martin Luther King went up to those sheriffs down south and said, "I've come to try you," he was coming from the Bible, and he was using some of the same concepts that he was taught in the seminary schools, I call them cemetery schools, to use it as a weapon to show. And I'm so happy that television existed then, because these racists were able to see how inhumane they were. And I always say, you talk about aliens, aliens are right here on this planet. There are people who are inhumane, because to be truly human, you've got to be humane. You have to have compassion for your fellow brothers and sisters. What kind of humanity is it when you cut off 1.5 million people from unemployment insurance and let them starve? And that's all people. What kind of people would do this to their own just to get to you know whom? Something is really wrong about that. So again, as we embrace the culture of Ma'at, it's our sacred duty to reclaim our position as elders of this earth, and that's the reason, as you were saying before, why we are not respected. We are not respected because we are going to come to argue with the same book that we were given. No, I remember I went to see a Rasta elder, and this Rasta elder came to confront me with 3 Bibles of different versions. I said, you're still in kindergarten, my friend. I had the Pert Emru with me, the book of the coming forth today from night, known as the Egyptian Book of the Dead, in order to keep us away from it. And I said, you come to me, you are an African, you claim a Cushite heritage, you claim an Egyptian heritage, a Ethiopian heritage, then are you not a son of Cush? And is Cush not a son of Ham? And does not the book that you bring to me tell you to honor your mother and your father, that your days may be long on this earth? According to the Bible, is not your father... I asked him, I said, based upon the biblical story, is not your father the one they call Ham, which is really Chom, because in the Hebrew it's a K sound and not an H sound. King James was wrong when he used the H to spell the word. If he used the K sound, Kum, because in the Hebrew, Chom means burnt, blackened, or hot. And Kemet means the black land. Kamau means black people. This is how our ancestors, so we need to reclaim ancient terms that we used to describe ourselves and stop following the clones of our most ancient ancestors, who are trying to copy and pretend that they are the originators, that they had some great revelation that inspired men. Yes, inspired to steal and plagiarize, inspired to be what I call cultural pirates, and deny the primacy of the very people who taught your prophets. I keep on saying that without the land, without the Africans of the Nile, Abraham and Sarah would have starved, but because of their hospitality, they lived, and they went out richer than they came in. Because of the Africans of the Nile, if you accept the stories in the Bible, Moses was taught in the temples of Ainu, known as On in the Bible. The Greeks call it Heliopolis, the city of the sun. If it weren't for the Africans of the Nile, Yeshua, now miscalled in the Latinized name Jesus, would have likewise been slain by those who were seeking to slay the firstborn, according to that story. So these three major prophets were given refuge, education, and refuge again by the Africans of the Nile. Yet all we hear about is of some exodus, of some plagues for which there is not one jot or tittle of historical or anthropological evidence. And we are asked to believe these folklorish stories as the bona fide word of God. Well, you know what? It is the bona fide word of God. And what do I mean by that? Well, God are the gods, as far as I'm concerned, because that word did not even exist until around the 7th century AD, the word God. Because that comes from the Gothic language. The Germans to this day refer to God as Gott, G-O-T. And anybody knows that in linguistics, the D and the T are interchangeable. So we could not have been believers in God because the word was not invented yet. But we accepted the presence and the divinity of Inqara, who they call Neter or Netcher. This was the one, all one divinity that encompasses all things. And from Inqara descends the various aspects and expressions of Inqara, which we refer to as the Neteru, which the Egyptologists pejoratively refer to as gods and goddesses in order to slander African thought as polytheistic, and therefore they're going to come and teach us about the monotheism. Well, what a great experiment monotheism has been. A bunch of murderers and thieves and robbers and rapists and lynchers for all your monotheistic beliefs. How much humanity have you shown with all your monotheistic belief against the people that you refer to as heathens and pagans? When I look at the faces of our ancestors carved in stone, I see the serenity of these people. When I look at the face of Ramesses II, Amenhotep I, II, III, and IV, Pepi I, and all of these rulers, when I look at the face of Nefertiti, who they call Nefertiti, when I look at Nefertari, the wife of Ramesses II, and I see such serenity, such beauty, and such defamation have been heaped against our humanity's ancestors. Let me say this again. While we Africans can claim this culture truly belongs to all of humanity. Because all of humanity has been fooled and bamboozled by liars and thieves and cultural pirates. And you see, I'm at the age now where I'm not afraid of any fatwa or anything you may do to me. Why? Because you've done it already. I've died a million deaths. You just dragged my brother in Jasper, Texas. You tied him up in chains and you dragged him through the streets. You have lynched and crucified my brothers up and down the South. That book that's called
100 Years of Lynching.
Yes, 100 Years of Lynching. And the other one where they have the postcards. Yeah, Without Sanctuary. And let me say this, that there is a book which has been hidden. There was one copy of it in the Schomburg Library. I don't know if somebody took it, because the last time I sent somebody there to see if they can find it, they couldn't find it. It's a book called God Wills the Negro by Theodore P. Ford.
I've heard of it.
Okay? In that book, the author delineates 21 different areas of similarity of behavior that African Americans have with the ancient Kemetic people of the Nile, now miscalled Egyptian. Okay? And if you can't find that book, then get the book, the autobiography of Sun Ra, called Space is the Place. In that book, the author goes to a long dissertation on how this book, God Wills the Negro, influenced Sun Ra. Okay? So, and another thing, the Dogon of Mali, they identify with the cycles of the star system of Sepet, known as Sirius today, known as Sothis in the Greek, and Potolo by the Dogon. The same, and when Ditelin and Griot, who wrote the book Conversations with Ogotomeli and the Pale Fox, when they asked the Dogon, how did you know the dark star was there? Because that star was not seen until the 1970s. They had a most powerful telescope to photograph that star that was orbiting the bright star Sepet, called Sirius. The Dogon said, we looked. Then, again, the Yoruba traced their culture back to ancient Kemet. So do the Akan of Ghana. As a matter of fact, in Ghana, there are many people with the name Ankh Ra, which means the life of Ra, the hidden sun. Again, they say, Ra is the sun god. No, there's no sun god or moon god or star god. We didn't attach that term to the deities of the cosmos. No. So these are pejorative terms used in order to defame us and to keep us from claiming that which belongs to us, which is needed by the whole world. Because, look, African people in the West, we have been healers of monsters, okay? We have tried to show them the inhumanity of their behavior, but they are still at it because that is the law of nature. How do we find the good? Because you have to have the bad, okay? So there are people who are born to be that way, and there's nothing that can be done to change them. Now, let me not say that this is something that is just, as Chester said and pointed out very wisely, there's not just one race who is evil. There are devils in all races. Okay, let's get that clear. This is not about racism. This is about history, and this is about our story. I think they just, African History Month just passed. We should have African History Centuries, because that's what we should be about, studying our ancient culture. And another thing, as Chester said, there's no museum in the world that considers itself a first-class museum without what? An Egyptian wing, or at least some Egyptian artifacts. Where did all that work come from? From a people who worked with their hands, with both hands.
Millions of artifacts.
A people who were ambidextrous. I look at the condition of my people, my young brothers and sisters in the streets, all they're using their hands for is to pull up their pants, which they deliberately make so they can fall down because it'll give them something to do, or to finger their crotch. That's all they're doing with their hands. We're not building anything. And that's why Brother Clemson, I says, you have to go back to sculpting, because when I met you, you were sculpting in clay, my brother. I have an artifact over there that you did. Please get me that artifact. Take those umbrellas out of it. That you did over, what, over 35 years ago? You came
40
to
years ago, because it was
about 40 years ago?
And
Look at this.
That's 1971. I did that. 1971.
You see, they see you behind the camera all the time, but they do not know. When you use your hands to handle your camera and move your angles, but
the
this...
top, so I can see there's a pyramid on top of that.
Ha! See that triangle there?
And then I wanted to put the people who built those pyramids around it. So you
see?
have three. Let me ask you something, Brother Samaj.
Yes.
That's a 45-degree angle, that pyramid. And as I told you before, I attained the degree of 33-degree masonry. But what does that 45-degree angle suggest, my brother?
Well, I don't think that the pyramids was at 45 degree. What
No,
was that?
this. Well, you have a 90-degree angle, but
HERU, what would you say that represents? The 45-degree angle.
that is one of the most
Sacred.
important. Yes. Now, when I say you stand as a 33-degree Mason, standing on the square, what does
Precisely.
standing on the square means? You can't build anything of any height unless it is based upon the square or 45-degree angle. You couldn't build the World Trade Center, the Empire State Building, anything if you're 1 degree off, because the higher you go, the more it's going to lean.
Precisely.
Until finally it's going to fall. But if you have a perfect square, 45-degree angle,
Yes.
then you have truth. Yes, that's it.
You see?
That's why I asked you the question.
All I can do is demonstrate it.
Okay, that's why I asked you the question. Now, that's not an accident. You can't look out in space and give me a perfect horizontal,
No,
vertical.
HERU was saying what I did was a 90.
Okay,
Come
I'm
and
saying
demonstrate the
45 is
45,
90.
HERU.
The square is 90. The T square, the L square,
It's all 90.
90.
Okay, okay, and you're correct.
And half of
I'm-
90 is a 45.
Right.
Right.
Half of 90 is a 45. So that's what I was commenting out. But it's a 90-degree angle.
So we
but
gotta check that out.
you can't look out into space and level that. You can't level that plane. You can't, unless you have the mathematical formula for that, which is what? 4, 5, 3.
That's right, and those are the angles of the pyramids, and again that 4, 5, and 3 is equivalent to the 3 Neteru: Ast, Asar, and HERU. You see, HERU is the 5, Asar is the 3, and Ast is the 4. I'm sure that's the configuration. You know, we have been blessed with so much knowledge from our elders that at this point sometimes I've forgotten the things I used to know. But I continue to study because I remain in school. I will always be in school until I leave here, because this planet is a university. It's a place where we come to learn and to remember.
Yes.
You see?
Right.
And that is what we are called upon to do, to remember who we are and to honor our origin and to share this knowledge with brothers and sisters. The problem is, and I remember when I was a police officer, I used to clear the corner by coming on talking African culture, African history. Oh, I don't want to hear that. And they'll walk away. And that's the way instead of threatening people and say, I'm going to lock you up, I would just come, hey brother, tell me a little bit about your African self. What are you talking about, man? I don't know what you're talking about. I said, oh, well, who are you? Look at this lovely skin you have. Where do you think you got that? You think you're just an American? No, you are an African first. And as a matter of fact, all humanity are African first. And I say African because that's how it's spelled in Ethiopia. A-F-R-A-K-A. Af is the flesh. Ra is the hidden sun, and Ka is the soul. We are the soul and the flesh of the hidden sun. And that goes to all humanity, even those who may have lost the pigmentation of their skin because of migrations away from the central garden and coming back now forgetting their origin and acting like a bunch of fools and mistreating their parents who still carry the robe of the solar energy in their very skin. This photonic robe, this robe of light that we are so envied for. I always say we are not hated because we are dark-skinned. We are envied for that purpose. Because when you look at the sun and you know that the sun has a problem with your behavior, and the sun may give you cancer if you stay out too long in it, of course you're going to long for this shade. But still, it creates a schizoid condition among the people who hate you who pretend to hate you because of your color. Yet, truly, they wish they had and would risk skin cancer to get what you have. So we realize that all of us on this planet, and we had better get this straight, all humanity are connected. And that what was left in the Nile Valley and throughout the African continent and wherever old cultures exist is for the whole world, for us to learn from each other so that we can understand that we are here in this great divine experiment which we call Earth for a purpose. And that is to recognize that we are the eyes and ears and the mouth of the divine. The divine loves us, loves to be worshipped, and therefore we're given these eyes, these ears, and this nose and this mouth in order to praise that which we are. I remember Morgan Freeman was being interviewed by this British interviewer, and he said, "Do you fear God?" Morgan Freeman says, "Why should I fear that which I am?" I said, "Thank you, Morgan." And I'm sure he was not saying that because he played God in 2 movies. He was saying that because he understood that that's who we are. There is no separation of that which has created us from its creation. We are connected by the umbilical of spirit. You call it breath. And know that the word spirit can be traced to the Latin word espire, which means to breathe. So all of us are really spiritual. All we have to do is breathe. But what are we going to do with this spiritual energy? We can use our spiritual force to do good or to do evil. And I think there is a chapter, a verse in the Bible that's where God is saying, "I created evil." So I always tell my minister friends and my pastor friends and reverends, I said, the first thing you must do when you get up in the morning is drop to your knees and thank God for the devil, because without the devil your church would be empty. But who created the devil? Who created the devil? The Pope, I think John Paul the 23rd, he admitted, and I know this disappointed a lot of people, that hell or heaven are not places, they are states of the mind. If you are feeling no pain, you are in heaven. If you are feeling pain in your body, you are in hell. And I don't know why people are so occupied with wanting to go to heaven, because we're already there. Heaven is in space. We all talk about looking up. No, we are out here with all the other planets and galaxies and meteors and all of that. We are out here. We are already in the heavens. You want to go up there and freeze? So drop your fear, my brothers and sisters, of not going to heaven, that you're going to go to hell. Right. I think it was George Carlin who said that there's this man who created 10 things he doesn't want you to do, and if you do those things, you will burn in hell, and you would suffer for generations, and you will be screaming and crying. But he loves you. When I heard that in this zeitgeist, Colin made that joke in the movie called Zeitgeist, where this movie explains exactly how religion has been used to lead people astray or to have people believing in these things. And I need to say that belief is really a psychological addiction of the mind and the soul. The worst kind of addiction is soul addiction. And if you do not pursue knowledge, you will be a slave to belief. Like I always say, the bee on the leaf gets no nectar. You've got to go to the source. You've got to go to the flower. And that's what I invite our brothers and sisters to do, to go to the flower of our legacy and to get to know who you are so that you will understand your purpose. I give thanks that I've discovered my purpose, which is to continue to create the artifacts that are in the museums, you see. But I make it for wearable purposes, so you can wear it on your fingers, you can wear the ankh, you can wear it on your wrist, like I have these eyes of HERU, like I have fashioned this ankh. I need to say I gave this ankh, an ankh like this, to Dr. Ben in 1980 at Church of the Master in Harlem. I gave it to Sister Alma Numsa John, the first registered nurse in Harlem Hospital, in 1981 at the Festival of Isis in Brooklyn. I gave this same symbol to John Hendrick Clark in 1982. Since then, many scholars, Ivan van Sertima, Maulana and his wife Tiamoya Karanga has received this ankh. Our sister Chashi McIntyre, who passed on, received this ankh. Sonny Carson, Abu Badika, received the ankh from the studio of Qatar. Sun Ra, the musician, received this ankh likewise. Susan Taylor has received the ankh. So, and of course, Erykah Badu has made the ankh famous so that people are now no more afraid, because they say if Erykah can wear the ankh, then something must be right about it. When people say, oh, that's a pagan and heathen symbol, well, let's understand the origin of the word pagan. It comes from the Latin word paganos, which means village. Heathen comes from the Old English word, which means the countryside. Our ancestors worshipped the divine in their villages and in the countryside long before they built any temples or churches. Our ancestors used this, which honors the divine womb of the mother. The divine children, which are extensions, and the divine male, who is the seed sender to the womb that produces this. It's spirit, mind, and matter. It's water rising up to the clouds, precipitating back on the earth as rain to bring the seed of vegetation, which is food, out of the ground. So this sign, it's a word in our ancient language. So we have been made to be prejudiced against our own ancestral language because people, oh, that's a symbol, that's an evil symbol. Well, guess what? The aliens, the inhumane ones, can take anything and make it bad. Look what Hitler did with the swastika. The swastika was used by the early Buddhists for the longest time, and even in Africa it exists. It's nothing but the region of the four directions, the four quarters, east, west, north, and south. But look what this monster did. He took it and used it as a symbol of hatred against some of his own people. It was a family quarrel between Hitler and the Jews. They are from the same stock. So I don't understand why we cannot see that we all need to go to the source of our earliest parents to get direction. We are too proud. The schizoid condition of people who will tell you, well, the ancient Egyptians were white folks, and they came from outer space and they built the pyramids. I mean, it's so preposterous, the lies that are being told and that many people are believing. They made a movie called The Mummy's Curse, which shows scarabs. Scarabs which do nothing but the scarab beetle, which gathers dung. They have the scarabs eating a person as a carnivorous being. So they know that many people are discovering the lies, and they're trying to put stuff in the game now, I would use another word, so that our eyes would be diverted from reclaiming this ancient culture, which would correct the conditions that we see in the world today. Because Ma'at is so real. Ma'at is so beautiful. And that is what our ancestors were about, the sacred balance in all things. The sacred harmony, the pursuit of harmony, the pursuit of law, of justice, of truth. I don't even like the word justice because it really is a tricky word. It's just ice. You know, because that lady you see by the courthouse, she has the scales that one is up and one is down. In our legacy, Ma'at scales are even. Your heart is weighed against the feather of truth. You see, and that is the balance that we require in our ancient culture. And that's all. But to be Ma'atical, we have to begin by bringing it home to this temple. The acid and alkaline balance must be equalized. You see, we follow the sheep herder culture, which is a carnivorous culture, which then causes your blood to become highly acidic, which everyone knows now is a source of dis-ease. If your acid is higher than your alkaline, you are forming mucus, which later crystallizes as what? Tumors and cancer. Okay, that's all it is. People try to make complexity out of something so simple. If you keep drinking cow's milk, the calf has 2 stomachs to digest that milk. People of African descent are known to be lactose intolerant, yet we keep on drinking this milk. The sugar, we were cutters of sugar cane and growers of sugar cane in the islands, and that is, as Supernova Islam teaches us, 1 molecule away from crack cocaine, sugar. But these are the things that causes our body to be out of ma'at. So when people call themselves conservative, I wonder what do they mean? They are conserving something in their colon. Usually they are usually very obese, which means that there's corruption inside their body. If you are corrupt in your belly, you will be corrupt in the mind, because you can't possibly think straight, because acid corrodes the synaptic crossover, the electromagnetic crossover that you need in the neurons of the brain. So that's why we're giving birth to idiots, because if we keep on consuming these highly acidic substances, we are defeating our youth before they even are born. So people come to me and they ask me, how can I prepare to have a genius baby? I said, well, first you can begin by neutralizing the acidity in your bloodstream, putting more water in your system. And that's another thing. We're drinking sodas, and I think that the past mayor of the city was wise in trying to get people to see, hey, you're drinking these, 32 ounces of sugar. You are killing yourself. And as a result, you are now becoming addicted. Your first addiction is sugar. And that leads to the other addictions. That is a drug that's in every supermarket that you can get very cheaply. And it's killing our people, but no one is saying anything about that. They are running behind people who are smoking ganja, and they're putting them in jail for years and years for something like that. Yet they're smoking cigarettes, which they know give cancer, and they are, making it possible for you to have crack cocaine, you see. So we have got to wise up, and I think we are, but a lot of work still has to be done.
Boy, Brother Samaj, time just goes by too quickly.
Yes,
So I look forward to our next session. In which I hope we will begin to deal with the pyramids, other temples, and just all of these great monuments and edifices that were left behind by our ancestors. And you said that you believe that our ancestors knew that this time would come. And I believe that they had to know, because they left the horoscope. And anybody who can who can give you an interpretation of energy from its descendant from the sun and from the universe in degrees that will have an effect on how you think and act and be accurate with that, would have had to know that this time would come when we would need this information.
That's
And so they left it for us to study in order for us to restore a balance and peace on
Indeed.
earth. But we had to go through this tremendous pressure,
Oh, yes.
which makes diamonds.
Hmm. And you know, Reverend, when people, Minister Brown, when people say, well, if you're so great, how or why did you fall?
Talk to that.
It's a very simple answer. It's the law of cycles.
Absolutely. Seasons.
Seasons. There are no leaves on the tree. Now it's winter. But won't they sprout again in the spring?
Absolutely.
Well, this is the spring of our awakening as a people. You go on YouTube and you will see all these young brothers and sisters who have taken Kemetic names, ancient Nile Valley names. There's an awakening going on, and I know there's some people who would like to suppress it, because when they found the Rosetta Stone, which busted open the what they call the hieroglyphics, the Metuneter, they knew that their lies were going to be discovered. And I'm going to say this one last thing. How can the seat of Christendom exist with this monument taken from ancient Kemet, now called Egypt, and put in the middle of St. Peter's Basilica? A stone that represents the reproductive phallus of Asar, who they now miscall Osiris. And every Easter, the throngs of pilgrims that circumambulate around this African penis. They have one down in Washington, D.C. It's called the Washington Monument, but of course that one is hollow, like the promises of justice and freedom for all. But the real ones, there's one up in Central Park. There's one near to the Thames River in London. There are there's several, there's in Turkey, and all over the world they've taken the monuments from Kemet. And they exist in these Christian nations. So there's a contradiction here. If you call yourself a Christian nation that's against any idols and any monuments, what are you doing with these artifacts from this pagan and heathen civilization? We know it's nothing but lies.
Well, the Bible itself the Bible is a book that was written by corrupt individuals who plagiarized ancient African spiritual thought.
Precisely.
So we need to really be very clear on that, because the church facilitates the colonization of the image of God into a European image,
Precisely.
which psychologically forces African people who want to believe in Christianity that God is a European, and it destroys their ability to see themselves as God.
Well, again, that's because of this puerile thought that God is a man. What we refer to as God, the divine energy that is the creator of all things in this universe, is an energy.
Absolutely.
An energy that has multiple billions and trillions of expressions and faces.
Correct.
People ought to take Joseph Campbell more seriously. At any rate, thank you so much for coming, and I hope I've shed some light.
Is how we are supposed to work. The family, yes, is the foundation of what we call civilization, but it's the individual that makes up those families. What are they made up of? And I know you heard others today, Sister Jeffrey, Sister Afua, talk about the quality individual meeting the quality individual could then produce a quality family. But that is an organizational structure that has a systemic arrangement according to our ancestors' understanding of how the rest of nature do family. We're not going to create as human a separate kind of way of doing family from the bumblebee, or from the turnip greens, or from the falcon, or from the goat. The laws that govern their behaviors as family are the same laws that should govern our behaviors as family. What we need to do is learn those laws. But we don't have to watch a goat or watch a falcon. Our ancestors have written all this stuff down for us. We need to study our ancestors. When you are instructed and informed by your ancestors, you become educated. When you are instructed and informed by someone else's ancestors, you become ignorant and an enemy of yourself. All of the things you said that was negative are all true. And all of the things you suggest that is positive are all necessary and should be true. And so we have leaders, and I don't want to say leaders, that's another mistake we made. It's like saying the conscious community when we're talking about a bunch of unconscious people. So let's define what conscious means, and that's why we're here today. And what do we mean when we say conscious? Conscious of what? I'm conscious, let me be very clear. I'm conscious that I am God having a human experience. Have I arrived at the perfection? No. But Ray talked about the mission statement. My mission statement is the laws of the universe. I'm trying to learn them and then adapt myself to them and then teach them. Many people who are leaders who are even causing harm don't know they're doing it because they don't have the right formula for being a human being. The European took from us, when you can take one generation and cut off the transmission of the wisdom and create an ignorant people. And that's what was done with us. One generation of me not being able to tell my son how to be a man, then somebody can turn him into a homosexual and say that's love and call it normal and tell me if I don't accept it, they're not going to give me any finance for my country like they're telling the African nations.
Yes.
You know? I'm not going to, and my brothers and sisters who are into quote unquote the homosexual community, I love you too, you're my brothers and sisters. But I'm not going to accept the European damage around the notion of what love is, no more I'm going to accept the European damage around the notion of what is appropriate politics. So, when we talk about family and we talk about leadership, we need to talk about what is the appropriate political design, economic design, cultural design, and social designs. That's why we go back there to the ancestors. Thank our great ancestors that the desert and that river and the ecology that was Kemet has left us with everything we need. But even if we didn't go to Kemet, we sometimes get stuck on one of our civilizations. Let's go to Europe. And you know, I'm a priest of the Yoruba tradition, but it's the Yoruba tradition. It ain't the Geechee Gullah tradition, which I need to horn and get in place. But the Yoruba tradition is a good learning lesson. They have a concept called Aloha. In the concept of Aloha, they said that each of us are born into the world from our ancestors, and that each of us have come into the world as an ancestor that was once in the world, and that every one of our lives is a reincarnation of a life before, because we are in the process of perfecting that life to be like the divine. And they said in that process of perfecting, there's 8 comings and going, and there's 12 steps in each of the comings and going. And those 12 steps is 12 body of knowledge of ethical, moral behavior, and character formation training that you should go through in any single generation. And then I'm hoping I'm going to fast, but this is just one theology of Africa. This one didn't have rocks and stone, so they did it in terms of philosophy and concepts. But it's saying the same thing they said in Kemet, that we must imitate the rest of nature. The rest of nature is perfected. They're not deviating. Yes. We're the only thing in nature that have this thing that the Christians call the will. We deviate. Yep. Good example. In this place, and I knew Sister Barbara, and she consecrated this joint. So I know she's happy tonight. If you take the story, I remember there was a play here on Oya, and I came to that tonight because I'm a priest of Oya. And so everyone was talking about how it's good to see something that talks about the woman practicing polyandry, because the man was into polygamy. And these were many of the people who were in the tradition, but they had no true understanding of the tradition at all. And so Oya, this is a woman. She's a woman that represents strength and consciousness, and she's called the wind, sometimes the antelope. And so she marries this brother named Shango. Shango is this king, god of thunder and lightning. But that's a metaphor. There ain't nobody, no god, no thunder and lightning. You know, We were trying to explain some forces of nature that describe what had to happen within a human being when he functioned in a certain way. So Shango represents the courage within each human being to make the decision to train yourself, to change yourself to a higher ethical, moral, spiritual self. That courage is the lightning and thunder that is Shango. But once that happens, Shango has to meet and marry Oya. Oya is the change to win. You understand? That blows away the old and makes it new. Oya is the change that comes as a result of you making a decision to change. But you didn't just make a decision. The elders had a school of thought and process that helped you arrive at that place. There's a body of knowledge involved in the survival. And so Oya then marries Ogun. What is Ogun? The god of iron. What is the god of iron? The god of iron, that you want to make some iron, you take a dirty old rock out of the ground, you throw it in some fire, you burn out the impurities, and you get steel, right? What did you just do? You have transformation as a result of change. So the courage to change, Shango, determines that you need to reach into another part of yourself called Oya. And Oya is the change that takes place in you that came from you. And then that same change that was married to the courage to change, both that are within you, now must find the Ogun within you to the transformation as a result of that change, so you become this higher being. And so everything that Sister said has to happen to each and every one of us. But there is no leader that has any more obligation to you than you have to yourself and everybody else. You need to stop looking at this leader. The leader is the body wisdom of the universe. We must try to find how to learn that knowledge. When Queen Fool was talking about the foods, Queen, I used to like to do this lecture, Anderson, about what did you eat for breakfast this morning? And people would tell me, what did you eat for lunch? And they would tell me. Nobody killed them, ate any human beings. So why, if you're human beings and you lost all those dead cells yesterday from your energy expansion, why did you kill a human being and eat it? But you didn't do that. You ate carrots, you ate collard greens, you ate fish, you ate turnips, you ate onions, you ate garlic. So you ate the rest of nature, who you are, to replace the who you are. So as you eat the physical rest of nature, you need to eat the spiritual or the laws that is exemplified in nature to reconstruct the society and these families we're talking about. That's right. One person, that is 2 minutes.
What's up, brothers and sisters? My question was for Dr. Copper, but I'm hoping that you can answer it just as good or even better.
I may do like that college, but go ahead.
How can we motivate and inspire our youngsters to see that what happened to TransAtlantic can very well happen to them? What happened to Kendrick Johnson can very well happen to them, so on and so forth.
You know, I've been married, I think, for like 45 years. And every one of those 45 years, I was prepared to leave them. Because if anybody killed my child, I would kill them. And when Trayvon died, I sent a message to the father and I put it on the Facebook and others. Stop crying in front of this damn TV and go kill the man that killed your son. We have to explain to our children. Teach them what we're talking about here today. Why are we living? We are living because we want to mold ourselves into the thing we call God. That's what I teach mom. We are trying to be that thing that we call the divine. The Christians say, to be like Jesus, oh Lord, how I want to be like that. They don't even know what they say. But that's what they're saying, that we want to be the thing we call the divinity. You teach our children that, but you as a father teaching this. As I raise you up as divine, if anything violates you, I will violate that. And do it. I wouldn't want to leave my children. I wouldn't want to leave Carol. But I would make my peace and I would say goodbye and I would do what I have to do. I tell you that black men and black women decide, if you can take my child life, I can take your life. And if you can't find that one, you find another one and tell the world why you did it. And I guarantee you that's right. But as long as they can do it and you don't cry on the television, I understand what the hurt is. Ain't nothing wrong.
Elders, Dr. Ben, Dr. Storms, I've been looking at your DVDs for a long time. But this is a question to the panel itself. What is it for us to just buy 1,000 acres, build our own schools, our own homes, our own prevention centers? You understand? And the whole village to raise a community.
We're doing some of that. We're here in the National Black Theater. This is a Black Convention Center. What we have to do is use it more. There are other such centers, some smaller, some larger, in all of the cities. But what we are not doing, we are not making a decision to support ourselves. I know sometimes we don't have the people selling the food we need, and we got to buy from others, but where we don't have to, buy from our own people. I know we know how to make clothing. We got enough clothing people. Why are we still buying from other people? I know there's almost everything we use in the food, clothing, shelter, safety, we can get most of it from ourselves. That is the most fundamental decision we have to make. That has to do with a question of self-value, self-worth, self-esteem, and that comes from having a knowledge and an understanding of your history. Ancient history is absolutely necessary and significant. But you better understand the history of your mom and your daddy. You better understand the history of your grandparents and your aunts and your uncles. You better understand the history of that block you're living on. You better understand the history of the city of the Black community you're living in. If you begin to study history that way, working backwards, and then study the ancient history working forward, you're going to meet.
Okay.
And when you meet, you're going to
We'll
find
wait
yourself
till
free.
Ray Hagan.
Because the city of life is I was just looking at the fear. Do not have any fear of living as a free human being.
I've been, okay.
And that's the stopping us.
We take it.
Because,
Doc, you ready to go?
Because we don't see ourselves as human beings. We talk to someone about being the African man, the African woman, the African race. God is the only ancestor you got. Let me be clear. Whatever you think God is, that is the only ancestor you got. Everything else that's sitting in this room is a recycling of that.
Give Professor James Small a round of applause. Come on, put your hands together.
What are you saying?
Last but not least, for this segment, we have Dr. Ray Higgins. Give him a round of applause. Come on.
The bottle was knocked over. What was in it? Oh, no, I ain't saying that. No, I ain't saying that. No. Okay, as soon as Ray Hagan, I'm going.
What's up, brother Ray?
What's up, brother?
Looking at you from day one, brother. I learned something, so
Thank you, brother.
you couldn't never told to learn, brother. My question for you is, why it is that some people can't get over this black poverty? And sit down,
Say that again?
why it is that some people can't get over this black poverty?